And just want to welcome everyone to the Food Bank Tableau user group. We have a fantastic group meeting today with Dennis Kao, Tableau Visionary, multiple Visit the Day awards. And we're also really honored to have, this event is actually co-hosted with the Data Plus Maps Tableau user group, which we'll hear about in just a second. Quick look at our agenda. Again, just want to point out this session is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it or share with coworkers, colleagues, friends. I'm Caleb Gibbons. I'm the digital marketing and data analyst at Feeding the Gulf Coast in Theodore, Alabama, and the co-host for the Food Bank Tableau user group is Tammy Jackson, data analyst at Golden Harvest Food Bank. Some of you may be thinking, I didn't know there was a Tableau user group for food banks. There is. We're about a year or so old, so we're pretty new, so we're still getting the word out. Like the name implies, we're just an online Tableau user group for anyone working in the food bank space or at other hunger relief type organizations. And like most tugs, we meet to share knowledge, best practices, different use cases for Tableau. We meet about once a quarter, sometimes that varies. And we have guest speakers that present on a variety of topics for all skill levels. And we've had really been blessed to have some great speakers, and today is certainly no exception. So the QR code you see there is going to get you into our Slack community so we can stay connected and communicate between meetings. So please do that as well. And I always like to point this out. If you want to be more involved with the Food Bank Tableau user group, please reach out to me, and we can certainly have that conversation. If you want to present, if you have an idea for somebody to present, something you'd like to see, please reach out, and we would love to do that. We have a few ideas on the table Tammy and I have been discussing, but just need some other folks to get involved and be willing to share use cases and what you're doing with Tableau at your organization. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our guest speaker today, Dennis, mapping the possibilities. Dennis is, like I said, Tableau Visionary, doing some really incredible stuff with GIS tools and Tableau, creating some amazing maps. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I will pass it to him to talk about the Data Plus Maps Tableau user group briefly, and then we'll get into his keynote.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Caleb. So there is, if in case you weren't aware, there's also a Data Plus Maps tug, and we're just a bunch of folks who are interested in maps and are just want to explore kind of the different ways we can create maps, use map layers specifically in Tableau. And so, and actually next week, let me share my screen. I can share my screen now, Caleb. Great, thank you. I hope you all can see that.
Yes.
So actually next week we have a meeting as well, our next tug meeting, and the focus is on map layers. And we have some amazing speakers coming next week as well. And so just want to note that Wendy was probably the one person, she doesn't do as much in Tableau Public anymore, but she was the person about 5 years ago that inspired me to start using Tableau. And so I was just amazed by her. I was doing GIS mapping for about 10 years and started seeing her stuff pop up on Twitter and was just blown away, and it kind of turned just turned me on to Tableau. And that's kind of, she was the one who kind of was my inspiration for starting to use Tableau. And then we have also two other visionaries, Annabelle and Persign, who are going to be talking more specifically about map layers. And so a great meeting that will hopefully build on this as well. All right, so let's get started. So thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Food Bank Tug, for inviting me. It's just, it's an honor to be here, and a little bit about something that I love is just the combination of maps and then Tableau. A little bit about me. So I'm originally from Los Angeles and came to Ottawa with my family, my wife and 2 kids, about 7 years ago. And I'm currently a social work professor at Carleton University. I've been doing GIS for about 15 years. And like I said, discovered Tableau about 5 years ago. Come November, it'll be 5 years. And I basically posted my first and last map visualization. And just having created several maps, quite a few maps over the course of the last 5 years, I can see in myself an improvement in kind of my skill set. I can see the maps that I create for work have been greatly improved. And it's also become kind of a creative outlet for me, just to kind of explore more broadly cartography and map design and things like that. So, so this has occurred, Tableau, kind of discovering Tableau has really kind of opened up a creative side that I really didn't know I had. And I always encourage people just to kind of keep on working on your craft, because you're just bound to get better. And I know this just from my experience 5 years. I also want to just make a quick note that this TUG is also just being able to speak among, be among other food advocates and food bank organizations. It's just a great honor. In a former life, I used to do policy work. This was based in when I was based in Los Angeles. Did a lot of work right around the time where welfare reform and food stamps were being cut and things like that. And did a lot of work on trying to improve accessibility to food banks and the electronic benefits transfer. That was later what it was later called. And collaborated a lot with food banks. And so I was on a couple of committees with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank. When I was a professor at the University of Houston, I also worked closely with the Houston Food Bank. And so this is, being part of this is just, I think very special for me. So I just want to kind of quickly go through the agenda. So the title of this presentation is Leveling Up Your Maps. And so I thought maybe we can break it down to 3 levels. So level 1 would be, can we do some great maps, create some great maps just in Tableau without the help of spatial files, anything else? If we had just kind of a regular spreadsheet piece of data set that had states, maybe zip codes, etc. Is there something we can do with that and create a good map? Because I understand that I'm probably in a different space than most of you. Most of you really just want to knock out some quick maps that look decent, that are readable, that are helpful in moving your businesses or organizations forward. And so let's talk a little bit about this level 1, where we don't bring anything else into the picture. Can we create a good map with just the tools that Tableau provides with a simple spreadsheet data set? Level 2 would be, let's start bringing in some spatial files. And these are some of the things that we can do. Tableau has greatly improved its functionality around spatial data, in the use of spatial data, with the addition of map layers, with the addition of spatial parameters and things like that. All of these kind of newer functions require some sort of spatial data. And so once we bring that in, I think that opens up the door to, some really great map making. And then if you're using spatial files, I would argue and encourage you to start taking up a GIS tool. I specifically use QGIS, which is a free tool, but you have ArcGIS Pro, you have other tools out there like MapInfo that are specially made and created and designed to handle spatial files. And so a lot of the spatial data prep that I do, I will do it in a GIS tool before I bring into Tableau in order to, where I can visualize and create my final map. Try to give you kind of some examples and kind of play with various data sets and things like that, that hopefully kind of give you some examples and maybe inspire you for your map making as well. All right. So my approach before we move forward is I have kind of some key principles that I follow when I create maps. And the first one is, if you want to make your maps noticeable, you just got to make them big, right? And so we have bands. So in addition to bands, big ass numbers, I would argue that you also can, make big ass maps as well, or BAMs. And so, you know, most of my maps, these are the last 3 maps that I created. You'll notice that the maps are kind of the central kind of part of the visualization. And I kind of build things around the open spaces that are inherent in the geography, right? And so if you want to get your maps noticed, just make them big. And I think there's also kind of a benefit to making your maps bigger is to you know, you're being more empathetic to your readers as well. Maps are only readable as big as, you know, they need to be big enough for readers to read it. And so especially depending on the geographic kind of area that you're trying to map. And so the bigger the map, and I understand in dashboards there's limited space, but if you can kind of make it as big as possible, you're definitely going to help your readers, you know, in interpreting and reading the map. I think most of my maps tend to be simple and clean, very basic. My rule of thumb is 1 map, 1 message. If you're trying to put too many messages or stories into a map, it gets a little bit complicated. And it's hard for the reader to decipher. And so if you have multiple messages, then I would argue that might be justification to make multiple maps. So my maps tend to be fairly simple, maybe 1 or 2 different variables. And then I try to provide some minimal context, something that helps the reader understand the context of the map. If there's a point where, you know, kind of generically or generally, where is that point? And then I fuss a lot about the small details, but I think the small details really matter, and especially like when you're thinking about just broader data visualizations, a bar chart and things like that. Something like getting rid of the grid lines, just that small detail makes a whole lot of difference. You can apply that in maps as well. And I'll try to give you some examples of where just these little details, you know, maybe people don't think about, or maybe, you know, people don't have the time to think about, but I think could just make a whole lot of difference in the readability of your map. And so I'll just kind of hopefully touch upon a few things here and there. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's go to level 1, which is mapping in Tableau only. And like I said, you can do a lot in Tableau. I would say in most, like if I understand the data analytical space, I would say, you know, 80, 90, 95% of the maps that you create could probably be done in Tableau solely. Sometimes you might have to fiddle around with some spatial data here and there, but you know, so let's figure out kind of what we can do in Tableau to make our maps pretty. Okay, great. I thought I did a caption, but oh, here we go. So I have put all this data that I'm going to be using in a Google Drive. So if you're interested in not necessarily following along, but no, taking a look, you know, playing with the data, etc., feel free to access it. It's all public data that I pulled from the web, from various sites and stuff like that. And so feel free to kind of use that data. You can also download QGIS to kind of play around as well. Or you can just follow, you know, if you're kind of right there, you can also follow along if you want as well. Okay. So right here, so this is the first worksheet. So I have a data set that I pulled from Feeding America, which is basically all the food banks in America that are part of the Feeding America network. And there's an address, there's a state, zip code. They also had the counties it covered, but I took that out for the purpose of this presentation. And then I geocoded them to get the latitude and longitude, right? And so, so that's what the data set looks like. And so we can basically plot them onto a map quickly. So I'd used a make point calculation to so Y in this case is the latitude, X is the longitude, right? And so And we can create points on the map very simply, right? And so I'm just going to focus on this part, the continental part of the United States, because Alaska is just too huge up there in the north. And so this is a map, right? This is the map of food bank locations in the United States. Now, the you know, kind of the GIS or cartography in me is really bugged by several things here and there. One is, first of all, it's showing Canada and Mexico, Cuba, other countries, which aren't necessary for this set here, right? I basically want to show food bank locations in the United States. So I don't need Canada. I don't need Mexico in the map, right? But the default setting, which is, it uses the map box setting, a map box base maps. The problem with that is there's only so much you can do with this, right? So I can take out the entire thing, and then it won't show anything, right? I can take out certain things, like maybe I don't need the names of the states or things like that. But still, there's just too much information here. It's kind of it could be distracting to the reader a little bit. If I wash this all out, well, no, that doesn't quite work. I'll just have to uncheck those. And so there's a couple things that I think I would do in order to improve this map. Okay, so one thing that I can try to do is, I was playing around with this. I don't normally use Mapbox, but there's certain things that don't show up at certain kind of scales, right? So right now I'm clicking on the county borders here, and it's not showing up. It's not going to show up until you go down to the state level closer, right? And the lines are kind of bluish, right? And I'm like, wait, why are they blue? Like, I don't want them blue. But there's really nothing you can do at this point, right? Unless you go to Mapbox to customize the base map, right? There's other things that we can show. So let me zoom back out again. For some reason, it does shows area codes for some reason. I think it doesn't show zip codes. It shows the metro boundaries, things like that. So what I'm trying to do is provide maybe a little bit more context. So somebody could look at this point. Let me, actually, I need to disaggregate them by food bank. Like, for example, if somebody wanted to see what that point is, yeah, they can hover over it, but automatically you can't really see what's going on. So I want to provide a little bit of reference to provide the reader with, here's Houston. So I'm just focusing on Texas. Here's San Antonio. Here's Austin. Here's Dallas, right? And what could be helpful in this is maybe some county boundaries or maybe even roads, right? But I can't do that with the Mapbox at this level, at this scale, right? If I add roads, is there roads here? Oh, here, streets are already turned on, but I can't see them until I drill down to a certain level. And now I can see the roads, right? But again, I can't alter them in any which way, right? So I'm designing here in Tableau, but I want to make these roads pop more a little bit, make them a different shade or different color. I can't do that here because it's a base map. So the base map is basically an image in my mind that you can't alter at any point. And so kind of the designer in me wants to be able to design the map with a little bit more control, right? And that right now, I don't have any of that control right now over the base map, okay? So, but there's a couple things we can do to try to make this map a little more prettier, okay? So first of all, I am going to take out all the layers because I don't want any of those. I don't need the base layer. I don't need to see the terrain in this map because that has nothing to contribute to the story. So now I have a bunch of points. What I can do is, what's great about Tableau is it recognizes different regions, certain regions, counties, states, some counties, some counties that other regions, other administrative units and things like that. And so it automatically recognized the state variable or column field as a geographic variable. And so I can just plop that into onto the view as another layer. And because I'm in Canada, it doesn't recognize those. So let me switch those. Okay. And then let's make it into a map. And so now we can see all the states, right? And let me bring this down to the bottom. I will also change the, okay. And so we can do this and start kind of creating our map from scratch using kind of various map layers, okay? One thing that I generally like to do also is, so let me just color these a little bit. I will also color this by just the number. I'm just going to color this by the number of food bank locations in each state, which, obviously Texas, California being the largest, most populated, New York, they're going to have the most food banks and things like that. But I just want to kind of add a little color just to kind of show the design a little bit. Let me alter this to 60 and there. One other challenge is because we are using data that I brought in, because there's no food banks in Wyoming. Is that the case? Wyoming doesn't show up because we don't have data on Wyoming. And so one trick that you can do is I can create a calculated field. It's basically a calculated field. I've called it Wyoming, and it's a text of Wyoming. So that way Tableau can recognize it as a geography. And then I can plop that in as another layer also. Make that into a map. And then I'll bring that down below. Oops. And change that to maybe a different color. Because it doesn't look good with a hole right in the middle of the United States. And so that's just a good way to kind of just plug that hole with Wyoming. And then we can just alter the color, and it's a separate layer. So it's not being defined by this color palette as well, right? And so you can think about, different layers as different ways to use the same data and apply it in different ways. Okay, all right. And so let me just kind of play around with this. Maybe I'll make this a little darker, give it a white circle, maybe a little bigger. Oh, wait, I need to add this as a circle and then make that a circle. And then I can alter the size a little bit. And then let's make this color palette green. And then, so there you go. And I think that works as a good map. Okay. So that's a map. There's probably more that you can do in Tableau. I just don't quite know because I always bring in my own spatial files. And so we'll kind of turn our attention to that next. But but I think for most cases, I think that's a decent map, right? Like you don't really need to go beyond that. But the cartographer in me wants to say, oh, let me explore a couple other things, but I can't because I'm kind of wedded to what's in the data. I'm also wedded to kind of what's Mapbox provides as a base map, right? And so there's so much we can do, right? But when you start adding your own spatial files, and Tableau recognizes quite a few. So I'm going to use shapefiles. It also recognizes databases. I'm not familiar with map info tables, but KML, which are is Google Earth, GeoJSONs. And there's a number of places where you can get kind of free spatial files, including census agencies, natural earth data, OpenStreetMap, etc. There's enough spatial data that I think the extent to which you want to add a little bit, I think you can do. It kind of opens up this a number of different possibilities. Okay, so I want to kind of give you an example of that. So I have the food stamp folks here, the food bank. Sorry, I keep on saying food stamps, but food bank locations are here, and let's disaggregate them, make them a circle. Okay, and I'm going to start adding a few spatial files. So I want to add. Let me add the county spatial file, and so this is what a shapefile looks like. There's like usually 5 to 7 to 8 different files that can kind of contribute to the same shapefile. The only trick is you don't want to kind of play around with this. Like you want them to keep them together in a folder. You want them to all have the same name. But when you work with it in Tableau, all you need to deal with is this file that has the extension SHP for shapefile. So I'm going to just start bringing in a couple. And one trick is you can kind of bring all these data sources all at once, and then not all at once, not together as a clump, but one by one. And then you can go to back to the sheet to kind of play with them. So I'm going to add the county, and it's going to take us to the data source. But I'm going to quickly, okay, and then I'm going to go back and add the states. Oops, sorry. And let me add the roads as well, the primary roads. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me make this black again with the white circle. Okay. All right. So what we can do now is, let me add so when you add a shapefile, it's going to have, they're going to have a bunch of different fields, but the one that you're really concerned about is this geometry field that has the recognized as a geographic role. I'm just going to plop this in. And so that's a state shapefile. Okay, move this down to the bottom. I'm going to also bring in the county shapefile. So that's the county shapefile. And let me move that down to the bottom. And I'll play with them in a minute as well. And then let me bring in the roads. Okay. All right. So just so I know, so now we can rename them really quick. And I apologize, I'm going a little fast. Hopefully this is helpful. All right. So let's start playing with them a little bit. So let's make the counties totally remove the totally transparent, as well as states for now. Okay, and then let me make the roads a little thinner. Okay, so forth. So I'm going to just turn off a couple. Just now that we have them there, we can just start playing with them a little bit, right? And so I have the states here. One thing that you can do, there's a new function, a newish function, is it's called outline. So if you have a polygon vector file, and so in this case, we have polygons that are basically make up the states of the United States. You can use this function called outline. So let me call this state boundaries. Okay, and what this does, well, it will outline, it will return another geometry, a geographic file or field that is basically just the outline of the states. Okay, and let me show you what the value of that is. And so I'm going to just plug in the geometry here, like so. So it's basically the function's outline, and then I pulled in the geometry field for the state data source. into the function, okay? Okay, and what that does, let me turn this off and bring in that. Okay, so you see that, you can see that it's a new field. I'm going to bring that in. And what that does is, now you won't notice anything, but one thing that I'll just show you is this is no longer polygons. These are lines. And so what that means is we can alter the lines. We can change the color of the lines. So these are the boundaries now, right? As well as, because these are lines, we can alter the thickness of the lines. Okay. And so from a map design perspective, now this gives me a little bit more freedom, right, on what I can do. Okay. And so, for example, what I could do is add the counties. Okay. And then make these lines, I want to make these lines maybe kind of grayish a little bit. Oh, wait, no, lines, sorry, lines, kind of grayish. And then now I have the state boundaries, and I can make them as thick, a little thicker, a little thinner, whatever you want. But I think because now you can vary the line thickness, it just adds a little bit more aesthetic, right? Like it differentiates the different administrative units, right? So county boundaries versus state boundaries. It highlights the state boundaries a little bit more than the county boundaries, right? And so it just gives you a little bit more control over the design aspect of the look of the states, look of the lines or the polygons. And so it just, I think, adds just a whole nother level of control over the aesthetic. And I think just this little detail kind of makes a big difference in just the map. I think it's a little more readable. I can see the states, I can see the counties. And I think it's a little bit, I think it's more beautiful, I think, personally. Okay. Now, in some cases, counties might not mean anything at this scale, right? Like it's very difficult to see the different counties. Let me turn off so we can't select them, right? But so I'm going to turn off counties. Let me turn on the roads now. Okay, and then let me just kind of play around with the roads and see if I can kind of fiddle around. I think that looks pretty good already. Like if I added gray. Now, the roads, these are just the primary roads. I got this straight out from the Census Bureau, US Census Bureau. But the addition of the roads, I think, seems to me, at least for me, from a readability standpoint, makes a lot of difference. So let's just key in on the state of Texas, right? Now I know, like I'm familiar with the state of Texas because I used to work in Houston. Now I know this is definitely Houston. This is the Houston Food Bank. San Antonio's, let me turn off the selection as well. This is San Antonio, Austin, Dallas is right around here, El Paso, etc. Right? And so the roads provide, so the focus of the story, and I should make these pop more, right? The focus of the story are the food bank locations, right? But the roads aren't necessary, I think, but I think add a little bit more reference for those who want to read the map, okay? It's helpful to know, like this, it's clearly, for those who are really familiar with Texas geography, would have known this is kind of the Dallas area. But now that we see all these roads kind of converge, it really adds, I think, to kind of the instant readability for those who maybe not be as familiar, but maybe understand enough that Dallas is one of the bigger cities in Texas, right? So, all right. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful. So we're going to turn our attention now to, if we're using spatial files, I think it's helpful. I would even argue that it's important that you have some knowledge on using a GIS tool. in the same way that you might do data prep in Tableau prep that you can't do directly in Tableau, or you might do data prep in Alteryx, stuff that you can't do in Tableau. I would argue kind of in parallel, spatial files, you can't do a lot with spatial files in Tableau, aside from maybe visualizing them. But if you wanted to prep the data, then a GIS tool would be a great way to go. Right? And so I can see that we're kind of bumping against time. But I have like a couple more worksheets. I was going to see how far can we go, but I want to show you a couple things here. Okay, so QGIS, let me plop this is the tool that I use, and it's totally free. Some of you might be at organizations or food banks or other organizations that have access to ArcGIS Pro. As a nonprofit, you can have a nonprofit rate in using ArcGIS Pro. But I use QGIS. I'm a poor academic. I don't have much funding for software, so I use QGIS because it's free. Okay. All right, so let's turn our attention to QGIS and why. What are some of the reasons why you might want to use QGIS? So QGIS, this is kind of the layout. It's kind of similar in some ways that here, as you add layers or map layers, you'll start seeing the layers here on the left-hand side. Then the view is right here, okay? And so I'm just gonna start adding a few files and I'll show you, and kind of I think you'll instantly see kind of the value of using a GIS tool, especially for spatial data, okay? So for this example, I want to look at the food pantries in LA County. I pulled this from the LA Regional Food Bank. They had a directory, and I took that data and created a spreadsheet out of it. Okay. So in order to map out food pantries in LA County, I need some things that are focused in LA County, right? And sometimes data comes in it, comes in that form, like specifically LA County. But in other instances, maybe in most cases, we get data that is broader or goes beyond LA County, or maybe maybe a specific city, right? And so we have to kind of filter down the data and then pull it in. So that way we're not pulling in a bunch of data into Tableau, but just the data, spatial data that we need. And I'm just going to give you a few examples here just to kind of show you, right? So for example, I have a city and communities of LA County, and I'm just going to pull that in really quick. It's going to ask us kind of what projection we want to apply. I'm just going to push OK. And then you'll notice that it just maps out the shapefile for LA County. I'm going to change this to Mercator, pseudo Mercator, because that's the projection that Tableau uses. Just so that everything that we do here will then look exactly the same in Tableau, okay? And so right away, just like I added one layer, but you'll notice that it instantly views it, puts it in the view. And so just that alone, I think adds value to knowing how to use a GIS tool, right? In Tableau, it's a little less efficient, right? It's a little clunky in some ways. You can do it, but it's just a little, it's not as efficient as using a GIS tool. So I want to key in on specifically the city of Long Beach, which is this polygon right here, okay? So I can identify what each of these are. This is the city of LA. This is, I think, Santa Clarita, etc. Okay, but I want to focus on Long Beach, right? And so I just need the information for Long Beach. I don't need information for all the cities in LA County. And so what I can do is I can use another tool called Select, this pointer. So I can use my cursor to actually select it, and you'll notice that it turns yellow. That means it's selected. So if I go to the attribute table here, you'll notice the only one that's selected here is Long Beach here, okay? So this is the underlying spreadsheet that is underlying the polygons, And what I can do is I can copy and paste it, copy features, and then paste features. And I'm going to create a temporary layer. So this is just a temporary layer. It doesn't exist anywhere in your files. Just a temporary layer that is based on the original layer, which is LA County cities and communities. When I push OK, you'll notice that now we created another layer, that specific Long Beach. Now I can turn this all off and zoom directly into Long Beach. Okay, right. Okay, so now I have a polygon that represents the city of Long Beach, right? And then let's say I want the roads. I like roads because I think they provide some good reference points. So I'm going to pull in the roads. Oh, I have one for Southern California. Sorry. I pulled this from OpenStreetMap, the roads for Southern California. Okay. Now I don't need the roads for Southern California. I just need the roads for Long Beach, right? And so one tool that we can use is called a clip tool. Here. And a clip tool will basically clip whatever file based on another file. So in this case, I want to clip the roads. And I want to clip it by the new Long Beach layer that I just created, okay? And when I do that, it will create another layer, clipped. Let me rename this to Long Beach Roads. And then I'll turn this off. And now we just have the roads that are inside that polygon Long Beach, right? And I can save this. Let me quickly save this as another shapefile. And then we can save that, and then we can pull that directly into Tableau, right? So let me just quickly do that. So I'm going to save this as another file. Sorry, I should have had all this ready. Okay. So these are just the Long Beach roads, right? I'm also going to save the Long Beach polygon because I want to just map Long Beach specifically. So I'm going to make that permanent and add that as Long Beach. Okay. And then really quickly, I don't know why it's taking so long. So then I can start adding those files. So in this case, these are the roads. And then this is the shapefile, I believe. Hopefully it's done. And now that I have this as different data sources, I can just add I can add them. So there's Long Beach. There's the file that we just created. And then these are the roads. Oh, what happened? Okay, something happened to the road. So I would probably redo that again because it's not showing up for some reason. Something happened to the save process. Okay, all right. But hopefully you get the picture, right? Okay. Okay, so those are just kind of two quick examples of how I might filter the data, then pull it into Tableau to just do the final visualizations, right? Because I don't need this entire data. Like you'll notice the roads in Southern California, it's just a massive data set, right? And you don't want to have to pull that in, right? And so I just basically picked the geography that I wanted and then filtered it by that. Another way to do that could be, I can also draw squares. So I'm just going to quickly create a temporary scratch layer and call this rectangle. And it's a polygon. And I'm not going to add any fields or anything because I just want that rectangle. Okay. So it adds a rectangle layer, but I need to draw the rectangle now. So I'm going to use this option here called add a polygon feature. And then in this case, I'm going to draw a rectangle. Yeah, I'll use the extent. That's fine. Okay. And so what I can do is now I can draw a rectangle. Okay. Now that rectangle, it's a rectangle, but that rectangle is now geographically linked to that geography. Okay. So I can actually save this as a shapefile. I can use it to clip the roads. I can use it as maybe an extent, like in another map, a bigger map. But when I go to Tableau, it now adds that rectangle here. And it's here. And hopefully this works. Okay, and then there's that rectangle that I drew, right? And there might be some different reasons why you might want to draw a rectangle, things like that. But I use it to designate an area, and then I might clip the roads, clip the rivers, the water, things like that for purposes of bringing it into Tableau. Okay. A couple other things I want to quickly show you. So these are just some examples. There's some examples of maps where I basically use selecting, clipping to kind of create some maps. And so these are just some examples. The other thing I want to just quickly show you is so when Tableau maps something like the world, what we're basically seeing is, so there's a number, hundreds of different projections, and the projection is basically because the world is like an imperfect sphere, and so in order to put the world onto a flat surface, there's different ways to peel the surface, like an orange, and so, but the different ways that you peel that orange and different projections that result from it will have different advantages and disadvantages, right? And so for the Mercator, it's really good, like kind of in the central part around the equator. But as you go out to the kind of the northern and southern parts, things start to expand, right? And that's just because the way it was peeled, right? So one thing that I like to do, and let me post this link here. There's an article by Sarah Battersby that is basically a hack. You hack and trick Tableau to creating a map that is in a different projection, right? And so let me just quickly show you an example of that. So I created this fake shapefile that is based on another projection, the Robinson projection, but it was created in a way to basically fake Tableau into mapping it, right? And so I'll just pull this in really quickly. And it's not really clean, but I'm just going to pull in the geography here. And now you'll notice it's like looks very different. So let me turn off the Mercator one. And now let's center this. And now I think we've gotten used to the Mercator a bit, because almost every web-based map, Google, etc., are based on the Mercator. But I think the world looks better like this, right? And this is just an example of that, right? Okay. Last point, and I apologize, I'm not leaving enough time for questions. I apologize. The last thing I'll quickly show you is, let me turn off a couple things. Okay, let's go to Long Beach. One thing that I do often, I do a lot of, is I use grids, and I create grids for various reasons. And you can do that in QGIS. So I'm just going to quickly create a grid, and you can create a point, lines, rectangles. I'm going to create hexagons just for the sake of quickly, just for this presentation. And I'm going to make them maybe 10 kilometer. Let's make them 5 kilometers long. Okay. Oh, let me see. What am I doing here? What happened? Oh, here. Okay. Okay. So now these are pretty big, but it basically created a grid. That's too big. I don't like that at all. Let me make them a little smaller. Sorry. For purposes of this example, it's not going to work out that well. Okay. So let me create another hexagon grid. And then let's make them 1 kilometer long size. Okay, so that's much better. And then what I'm going to do is quickly select by location. So I'm going to select the portions of the grid that actually intersect with the city of Long Beach. Okay, and that looks like that. And then I'm going to copy, and I apologize for going so fast. These are Long Beach hex bins. And then now I have hex bins that mirror the city of Long Beach, right? And there might be different reasons why you might want to do this. You can do some of this in Tableau. You can create hex bins, but the problem with that is you can't add it as a layer. It just becomes part of the map. And so with this, these hex bins are always going to be this size, no matter how much you zoom in, zoom out of the map. And then you can use it for various reasons. And in the presentation, I have a couple of places where I use the grid. I use grids quite a bit, and there's just a few examples here and there. And it's actually a great way to actually kind of hack Tableau, because currently Tableau can't handle raster data, which are basically cells with values in them. So things like weather maps and things like that. And so I use a grid, a very small grid in this case. There's actually 1 million, I think almost 1 million cells to recreate this kind of historic river flows that I did like maybe a couple years ago. But anyways. Okay. So I think that's kind of it. I have to leave like right at 1, but I'm happy to entertain any questions. I think in terms of final thoughts, I mean, just keep on working on your craft. I think it worked for me. I think I've gotten better, both professionally and personally, in my map making, just because I've been just doing it. It just, things start clicking, you develop your style, you discover like little things that, there's little things that I do that I don't even think about doing. I just automatically do, but has seemed to have worked in the past. And so just keep on working on your craft. And yeah, but I'm open to any questions. Thank you again for the time. Hope this was helpful.
Wow. Thank you, Dennis. Yeah. We do have a couple of moments. Like he said, he's got to drop off if there are questions, but man, my mind is just blown. I feel like we just got like the secret recipe to something really delicious. Like, this is really incredible stuff. And just to echo what you said when you first came on, I think maps can be such a powerful way to communicate a story. When the public sees a map, they see their location, their neighborhood, even at a county or state level, it's personal. And so as food bankers, when we communicate, the level of hunger that children face in these counties, that is really powerful. And when your maps can have that detail and that beauty, it just makes the story more powerful. So this is incredible. I'm really struggling to find the words to say how amazing this was, but really glad this is recorded so I can go back and watch. What's your go-to tool for geocoding? I'm just looking really quickly at some questions. Is it QGIS? That was one of my questions, actually.
Yeah, so geocoding. Yeah, so Tableau had announced a few years back that it was going to have geocoding addresses. And the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, I don't know how, because that's very complicated, right? I think that's harder than just mapping out states, right? because, but anyways, I would use QGIS. There is a geocoding plugin that you can use but some of it will require, like, it might tap into Google or OpenStreetMap or maybe another service. And some of those services might require an API in order to access. Another way is, depending on how many, I might just go to Google. Google has Google Earth. I'm not Google Maps has this. I don't know what it's actually called. It's called My Maps, and it's where you can actually create your own Google map. And that's another place where you can actually bring in data and quickly geocode it based on addresses and things like that. And then another place is arcgis.com, which is the online version. And for those of you who have an ArcGIS Pro, that will automatically do it because it'll pull from the Esri service and things like that. So that could be easily done. But arcgis.com is the online kind of version of ArcGIS Pro Maps. And they have this thing where you can upload a spreadsheet, and depending on how many credits you have. So I get credits through the university, but depending on how many you want to geocode, you can do it in maybe smaller batches and things like that. But those are, I tend to be a little old school because I'm an academic and I kind of like free source type of kind of mechanisms to do things. And so I kind of use these kind of maybe clunky ways, but they're probably more streamlined ways and more efficient ways to do that.
Yeah, good stuff. We like free and this kind of stuff too. GeoCodio is another site I've used.
Yeah.
You could do a lot.
And they used to be there used to be free ones for the batch ones, but now they'll charge a little bit, maybe for numbers. Yeah. So for, depending on how big the batch is. That's another option, depending on how many you want to geocode.
Yeah. I've done a few thousand and it was only like a couple of bucks to geocode those.
Yeah.
I know you got to hop off again. I can't thank you enough. This was really, really, really awesome. There's probably
if you want to send me the questions.
Yeah,
I can see some questions in the chat. Like, if you want to send me some questions, I'm happy to send back responses as well.
Thank you so much.
I don't know how, and if folks are interested. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're also in the Tableau community Slack community.
Yes. So yeah, I'm happy to entertain any questions via any mechanism that's helpful.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.